I think we can go ahead and get started.
Thanks, June. And we're excited to have everyone on board today. So my name's Rachel, and I'm in the room with Karen Basarab and Ann Palmer. All of us work at the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future as part of the Food Policy Networks project. We connect local, state, regional, tribal food policy leaders throughout the US and in part a little bit in Canada to help connect and share resources and knowledge across places. And you can talk to others in the network through our FPN listserv. We also have a directory of food policy councils throughout the US and Canada on our website. And we also have a resource database with over 1,200 resources that can assist you in a whole wide variety of food policy efforts. We also provide training and technical assistance to individual groups as well as at conference workshops and sessions. And this session today, this is the third workshop in our series with June, Holley, and Yasmin, Yonis. And we are excited to welcome them back and to share more strategies about self-organizing. So with that, I'll pass it on to June.
And I think Yasmin's going to start out.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll start us off. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Really excited to have you guys on our first session. Whether this is your third time or you're just joining us for this one, I think you'll be able to receive a lot. So today is something that a lot of people have been asking for. It's how do you implement the self-organizing strategy? So June is going to put a link in the chat box so you can have this PowerPoint with you right now. Thank you, June. And so next slide. So what are we going to be doing today? We're going to talk about how you can have give you the tools, the skills, and understanding to start implementing a self-organizing strategy with your council. How do you leave this session, go to your council, and implement these things? Next slide. So after we do our introductions, we're going to talk a bit about what is your self-organizing strategy. We'll go into breakout rooms. If you haven't done that before, they're really magical and a great place to get to know each other and discuss in smaller groups some of the questions that we pose for you to really think out loud and get help from your peers. We'll report back, have a discussion a bit, and then we'll talk about how to set up and coach self-organized projects, because you may have a lot of great ideas, but how do you go about not only starting them, but also having that momentum so they're continued and they're finished. And then we'll go on to breakout rooms again, come back, and then we'll talk about resources and next steps. So this is a session, like all our sessions, but especially this one, where you'll really be able to take very tangible things and implement it in your councils. Next slide.
And one thing I want to point out is we're going to have a little extra time when you come back from your breakout rooms for you to really collect some questions in your sessions, because we really want you, if you have challenges or doubts in your mind, we really want you to try to articulate those, and we'll try to answer, give you a little bit more guidance. So make sure when you're in those sessions, you're really trying to formulate questions or areas where you're still unclear, because we really want you to go off and experiment with some of these strategies. Okay, so I'm going to talk here for a little bit, and we're going to review, because there are quite a few people who haven't been here before, and it usually doesn't hurt to hear this a couple times. We're going to review a little bit what we did before. Okay, so whether you're a local council, state council, or tribal council, what we want you to do is start thinking about yourself not just as a council, a group of people that gets together once a month or whatever, but also that you are part of a network. Because thinking of that way, look at it, if you can see this network over on the right, there's all these people in your communities and around the country who care about what you're doing and want to support you. And if you can figure out how to mobilize them and get them working on food system stuff, you can make a lot bigger difference. And if you're really going to try to do policy work, which is where we're hoping many of you will move more of your action, because that's what's really going to shift the system and make a difference, you're going to need a network to go forward. Next. So, your council, next slide, your council then is much more a catalyst for a lot of policy action and bigger action in your whole community. And we call these kinds of networks, we went over it in more detail in the first session, but system shifting networks, because don't we really want to shift the way the food system works so everybody has access to food, healthy food that they need? And so we're going to have to shift the system for that to work. And these system shifting networks are not just any old network. You can see that they've got lots of diversity in them. That's probably one of the most important things as I work with local food councils. How can you better represent the people that you're trying to help? How can they be part of either your council or the projects that you're working on? So these networks, and they're also really self-organized. And after a while, you don't have to be in the middle of everything. You can get people working on lots of different projects and just give them the support they need to be successful. Next slide. So just to review, why is the self-organizing network approach so important? Because it's going to help you, once you start thinking of relationships and who's connected to whom, you realize that there are a lot of people out there who can be working with you, and you're going to need a lot of people if you're going to actually influence and shape food policy in your communities. A network also helps you get more diversity involved in designing and implementing this policy and programs. The research is so strong. If you don't have diversity in your council, in your work groups, you're not going to get the solutions that are innovative enough. That getting really, really successful innovation requires you to have diversity in your work groups, in your council. And self-organizing is really all about how people can begin to take initiative for doing work, and really helps you engage a lot more people by getting them involved in these groups, whether you call them circles or work groups or projects. This self-organizing approach really helps you get more people involved. But it's not magic. You have to do some work and investment to make it work. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, next slide. Okay, so, oops, I think we missed one. We probably need to, isn't there one before this? Try one after that. Okay, maybe that was the right one. I'm sorry. Okay, right. So what we've got to do is, a lot of your councils are like this hub and spoke, where you've got a small group who's working on something, and then maybe you broadcast information out to others. What we're trying to do is move to that system shifting network. And the best way to do it is through organizing a set of projects that partly bring in new people to work on stuff. Next slide. And so what you do is see each project that you get, you'll have some people maybe from your council part of it, but also reaching out, who else cares about this? They don't have enough time to be on our council every time, but they're really willing to work on this particular project. And the really neat thing about self-organizing is that it builds a tremendous amount of new leadership who can take initiative on their own. Next. Okay, so that's kind of review there. Now let's talk about, there are 3 kinds of self-organized projects. In the first session, we talked a little bit about the ones about networks and how they operate and develop. And last one, we talked a little bit about action projects or working groups. These are the groups that are working on food policy and food access projects. And they're all different, but some of the keys to self-organizing, you need to apply whatever you're doing. So you might have action, you might be working on network development. Hey, we need to think explicitly about our communication system and design it with other people, or training programs, or ways to keep track of what you're doing. Whereas network operations really are about things like planning and staffing, but they all can be done in a self-organized way. Next slide. Okay, so let's stop. What is a project? What makes a project self-organizing? And as I go through this list of 5, I think a lot of you are doing things that are at least partially self-organized. And I want you to really think, and we're going to ask you to write in the chat if you have a project that's like fits all of these 5 characteristics, or maybe it fits a couple of these. We'd love to hear about it. In the chat. Some of you are pretty far along with self-organizing. Some of you are just maybe further along than you realize. So if you have projects that involve people from different organizations or people from your community, if they're implementing the project together, that's one sign that it's self-organized. If a project can get started without everybody on the council agreeing to it or being part of it, then that's self-organizing. If there is no boss, if you have projects and nobody's telling people in that project what they have to do, then if they're working as peers, really working together as peers, not one person telling everybody else what to do, that's a sign of self-organizing. If it feels like an experiment, so you're not saying, hey, we know how to end hunger, but we're going to try something out. That's an experimental approach. And when you're doing experiments, you have to reflect a lot and really try to learn and figure out what's working and what's not. So if you have something like that, you're one step on the way to self-organizing. If your project is not permanent, if it has a beginning and end, and that's really important to keep it dynamic and to give you time to like, oh, did this work? Or, oh, this didn't work. Maybe we better not do it anymore. So if you have any of those 5 characteristics in a project of yours, please tell us about, okay, yeah, we've got people who are telling us about their self-organizing projects or partially self-organizing projects. Susan, love to hear a little bit more about what you're doing with self-organizing projects. I think you're working on some circles and in your governance system, and it'd be great to hear more about it. Okay, next. So just let's see if we can, anybody else have any of these qualities in, would be really, really great. If you have any of these qualities of self-organizing projects, let us know. Because I think people need to hear about, you know, what is going on. And maybe everybody's newbies out there, but if you think of that, hey, we're doing something that's a little bit self-organized, just share it in the chat. Okay, next. So maybe you don't have a lot going on, but you're interested in exploring and learning more. You're going to have to take what you're learning today and take it back to your council. You can show them the video, you can show them the PowerPoint, and you can download this self-organizing toolkit, which is, I'm going to grab the, maybe Yasmin can grab it. I'll let her.
Yeah,
Oh, thank you. So we have a toolkit, next slide. It looks like this, and it's like about 40 just PowerPoint slides of activities you can do to get started in self-organizing. But you can't just do it by yourself. You're going to have to go back, take it to your council, and talk to them about it. So just how to think about how can you introduce, how can you mail all this stuff out to people, maybe have a 15-minute discussion the first time at your next council. So we're getting some more people who are sharing a little bit about what they are, ways they are self-organizing. So you want to make sure you check out that chat. Okay, so anyway, you'll be able to download this either now or later. We'll be giving you the chat. You can download the chat by clicking on the More button in the bottom right-hand corner, and at the end of the session, it will download it onto your desktop. Next slide. Okay, so there's 2 ways to get started. You can either shift a current project into a self-organized project, or you can encourage and catalyze you know, 1 to 3 new self-organized projects. And we're going to talk about each one. Okay, so there's slightly different pathways. Some of you have like committees and they can switch and become more self-organized. Next slide. So if you have one organization, one staff doing all the work on a committee or a project, you can shift to getting people from different organizations to work on the project and feel responsible for its success. And you can even think even if you have a committee, you can try to include people not on the council, and maybe some of you are already doing that, and that's a good first sign. But to think about how you can work together more collaboratively on projects. And I think a bunch of you are already doing, and think about every aspect of your work and how can it become more collaborative. You might have standing committees, and what you can do is have that standing committee catalyze short-term projects. So you want a new web page, just your standing communication committee can recruit maybe more young people to be on that to help you get a cooler and more relevant web page. Maybe you have a committee chair who's like really dominant and sets all the agenda, figures out the agenda ahead of time. Encourage them to use some of the tools that we're going to introduce today, like even just having a Google Doc before every committee meeting where people can put in, what do you want this agenda to be about? So those are some ways to start shifting your existing projects. Next. Okay, so you can form new projects, and we went over this in last session. So I'm not going to go over I'm going to go over them very quickly. So let's move on to the next slide. So at a meeting, you could ask people what they'd like to learn or what aspect of the network you'd like to help others develop. They put it on a Post-it note, and up on the wall, you have them take a break, and you sort them out into different groups. And this is, you know, what one network decided they wanted to, you know, have discussion groups, and those can become the beginning of new work groups. Next slide. You can use a survey that says, which of the following are you most interested in working on, and give them some options, and also ask that really powerful question, how willing are you to help organize that activity? And that's where you can identify some of the coordinators you're going to need for these projects. Next. And then the best way is, and I'm going to be writing up a bunch more about this, details about this, is setting up an innovation fund to fund these small projects. And so you can put out the call, hey, send us a proposal for a collaborative project that you want to do in food policy. And you can have small grants. You can get lots of people involved in making decisions about those grants. And this can be a great way to get funding, because it's very exciting to funders to see, oh, here's 5 projects. We're going to be able to get 5 projects working on food policy. Next. So one thing that I've realized is that you can't just start self-organizing unless you have usually a little bit of money. And so one thing is that I found is that you have to build a network of funders and donors to support these projects. And so you have to do that at the same time you're starting to identify self-organized projects. Next. And so I don't have time to really go over this, but you can map using Post-it notes your funders and donors and figure out who knows whom and who can reach out to them. And so I really encourage you to take a closer look at this little mapping activity after the session, because it's just a way to really realize there are more funders that you can go to than you might realize, and donors, people who would be willing to give, a couple $1,000s to almost every community has people like that kind of hidden away. And if you really think about it explicitly, you can identify some of those folks. Next. Oh, so here's some examples of some great mapping. They weren't using Post-it notes, but you know, this is what you'll come up with, and you'll generate all kinds of ideas about new funding sources. Next. And just this idea that, hey, when you go to a funder, take some of the projects or potential projects along with you. And, you know, that excitement that people have about things they want to do is often very infectious and can make donors more interested in funding what you're doing. Next. So, Yasmin,
Yeah,
tell us what to do.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So we're gonna go into breakout rooms, and you're gonna go into a breakout room that I'm magically gonna put you in, and I'll just take you away, and then you're gonna select a note taker and someone to facilitate. And I'm gonna be sharing the link in the chat box, but you'll have 4 questions. We really want you guys to have an opportunity to get to know each other and also discuss this. So what you're gonna be talking about are, what are we doing that could become a self-organized project, and how might we get started with some new self-organized projects, surveying, cluster, innovation fund, some of the things that June was talking about, really just having the time to think through it with your peers. And we really want you to come back with some questions, some really good questions, so we can you know, have that opportunity afterwards. Welcome back, everyone. So do you want me to share the screen? I can do that.
Yeah, go ahead, and then we can see what you came up with in your groups. There.
So please share your insights. Let's report back. What are your, in the chat? What are your questions? What are your insights? What are some really interesting things that came up in your breakout room? What questions do you have? Tell us.
And if you want to shout them out verbally, that's okay too.
Yeah. Actually, Rachel, it'd be better if you do the screen share. Would you mind? Are they back?
Sure, I can do it. Hold on one second.
Okay, but we can take questions, so just pop them out if you have questions. Any doubts, any like, I don't know how this would work. Just, you can just talk. Take yourself off mute and ask away.
I guess one of the questions that I had, this is Liz, was how organized do you need to be, like as the center of the network, before you start catalyzing these self-organizing projects?
That's an excellent question, and I think we're going to try to address some of that in the second one. So hold that question, you know. But I think you do need to think if you're catalyzing projects that are going to need money, you've got to have that together first, and we're going to talk about that. But if it's smaller projects that people can just get together and do, you are going to have a support system for them. Just in terms of coaching and stuff, and we're going to talk about that. They can't be let out to dry. They need some guidance and some new systems to help them stay organized. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but that's a great question. Anybody else? A question that came up, or a doubt, or an uncertainty? People are competing for funds from the same funders. And maybe if people, you know, how are you handling, like if you get a pot of money for a number of different projects, is that competing with the organizations in your group? Is there a way you could think in some fresh ways about money and about that underlying tension for scarce resources? You know, I think if they're working on something together, as I think Carrie's saying, you know, often that takes away some of that competitiveness. But trying to help them see that if they each go to a funder, maybe they can get a lot bigger pot of money than if anybody went by themselves is one. But if you have thoughts about that, please share that in the chat with other people. Like, how have you creatively come up with money for projects? Okay, great. If you have any more, please, and Yasmin will be looking there and can interrupt me at any time to answer questions you have. Okay, next slide. Okay. So Liz brought up a really good question. You know, how organized do you have to be, both as sort of a staff person, a coordinate, council coordinator, or whatever, or as a council, before you get started on something like that? Well, you do have to have two things in place. One, you're going to have to think about coordination. Like, these projects need coordination, especially at first. I mean, I'm in groups that don't have any specific coordinator, but we've been working together for years. But most new projects, there needs to be a designated coordinator, and we're going to talk about ways you can do that. And then these projects need a system of support. They need a way to communicate with each other. How are they going to get reminders about what they're supposed to do, because they only have this little bit of time to pay attention to these projects? They're going to need the resources, and we'll talk more about that. And they need communities of practice and places to learn a little bit about how does a self-organizing project, most of us were probably brought up in schools where, each person had their own desk, and if you worked with somebody else, it was called cheating. And so, it's a whole new set of behaviors we're trying, to help people work together as peers. Next slide. So, you've got to, the coordination takes a couple things. First, you do have to have a coordinator, but then you can't let that coordinator out to dry initially, because they've got new things and behaviors. So you have to coach them. And you will, as council people or staff, you'll be only a quarter of a step ahead, but you have to start feeling comfortable with, as Yasmin said, comfortable with being uncomfortable. And just, like, a little bit more than they do, and you're going to share that with them and help them and support them and learn with them. And then you need these coordination system, which we're going to do. So next slide. So what does your council and staff need to do to get up, to get a coordination system going? Well, you need to provide a short training or whatever, spend some time with your council learning about self-organizing from that toolkit, from the different, we've had 3 series, and just using the slides from those can help people learn enough to be that quarter step ahead. And then I found that these little templates, and I'm going to share my screen and show you these templates that I have in here. And so I think I could share the screen, even though, oh, I can't, you have to unshare your screen. Oh, thank you. Okay, so now I'm gonna try sharing my screen. And what you can do is you can take this link that is in the slide set, and maybe Yasmin can put that in the chat as well. But I have these little templates I've created that really work to help a small project stay on task. Like the first one, and everybody can see my screen okay? It just has a bunch of Google Docs in it, just like, yeah? Mm-hmm. Yeah, thumbs up. Okay, everybody can see it. Okay, so one is like and you can go in here and you can save these. It's a different name. I'm going to show you exactly how. Like, you go into one of these files, you go to File, and why is it not? Oh, it's still loading. Oh dear. Okay, you go into File, and then you make a copy. Can you see what I'm doing here? Are you able to see that? Okay, make a copy, and then you save it on your Google Drive. You save it on your Google Drive, and you can give it a different name, and you can use this. And all it is a place where you keep everybody's name, and most importantly, their email. So everybody can always get in touch with everybody else. So that's a very simple one. the next one that I found is tremendously helpful is this. And it's nothing but, you don't even need to copy this one. It's something that says meeting agenda and notes, and you encourage them to, if they're going to have, so let's say agenda for January 29th. Let's say you're going to have a meeting, and you just send this link out and encourage everyone to put in agenda items. Then when the meeting happens, then you have them take notes on the meeting, and and then when you have the next meeting, you just right above this one, people can always go back, see what their notes were, and then you start an agenda for February 12th. And so some groups they've told me they have 3 years of meeting notes, but everybody knows where to go for those notes. And so that's very simple. But the one that I found that's the most powerful is the task and timeline. And basically all that is a very simple, if I can get it to come up here, a little spreadsheet, and you can change this, but you put in task when you have a meeting. As you have a meeting, you need to put in your tasks that you come up with, and some name needs to go by every single task, or it won't happen, right? And so you put that in, who else will be involved, due date, and updates. And if you send this out like halfway between meetings, just as a reminder, it really makes, the productivity of your group increase immensely. So little tricks like that can really help make a difference. So can you share screen again? So in the chat, talk about, would that be something that you could use that could help you? You need to help some of these groups sometimes set up a group email just for themselves, or some of you maybe use Slack. That's a fabulous tool for these breakout rooms, and really easy to learn. And so if you haven't yet learned how to use Slack, and it's free for most use, I really encourage, if you're going to do projects, it's a really nice place where people can kind of chat back and forth. You're going to have to train people in using Zoom and breakout rooms, and I know lots of people ask, well, what do we do if there's communities that aren't connected to the internet? And Yasmin's going to help us with that in just a minute. Next slide. Okay, so there's 4 different ways that you can organize the coordination of a new project. And first of all, usually a staff person or a person from council will coordinate the first project or 2. I mean, just because they're going to maybe know a little bit more. But I really encourage you to think about maybe somebody younger, somebody who hasn't been in a leadership position, coordinate with you so they learn how to use the templates, how to keep people organized, how to use Doodle, all those important things. But sometimes nobody in your council can do it, but you have somebody solid on the project who is going to volunteer for that. And, you're going to have to, again, coach them. Again, maybe you have somebody who is part of the project, but you're able to give them a small stipend, and just a small stipend, even like $500 or something, to help coordinate a project, helps them feel responsible and give it the time that it needs. And then what some groups have been doing is they invited facilitators from their community who were professional facilitators, and got them to volunteer their time. Or you may need to pay them. But, they're used to helping groups succeed. They might have to learn a little bit about self-organizing. So any of those ways you can use, but a project does need to be coordinated. Next slide. So, you can make a decision about which of these 4 you can use. And here's just a little chart that, suggesting that your staff person or council person does it the first time. You've got to get volunteers if you don't have any money, but it's really great to hire a professional facilitator or give a stipend to somebody if you have raised the money for that. Next slide. So here's just a checklist, and you can print this off, and when you're thinking about the coordinator, you can go through in your head, okay, do they have facilitation experience? Do they really care about this issue? You've got to double check, are they going to have enough time to really give to it? Are they willing to learn new things? Are they a good communicator? Are they respected by others? So if they get a reminder, they won't feel offended, they'll feel grateful. And somebody that doesn't have strong opinions but likes to help others. And I think they don't have to have it a certain way. They're not attached. So this is like, you could add, I'd love to see people add other characteristics that a coordinator would need to have in the chat. So please do add more, if you come across it. Okay, next. Okay, were you going to do this one? Oh, you were going to do the last one, huh, Yasmin? How about this one? You want to just go through this one, Yasmin? You've been a great coordinator of projects.
Yeah, well, I have been able to coordinate a lot of projects. Thanks June, and thanks to June actually for bringing me on to some of those projects. So the coordinator role is someone who really makes things happen smoothly and easily. I think that a lot of times we don't realize how much the projects can get kind of stuck if there's not someone who is responsible for moving it along. And sometimes it's a job that not everybody is suited for or is interested in. But if you find the right person, really can help do all the things that other people don't really want to do, and they're able to just kind of come in and do the work that they're passionate about. So this is a person who make sure that the people who should be in the group are in the group. They're always thinking about who are the key people in the project, and also who can be resources outside and bringing them in. And then is prepared for the calls and the meetings. So you set up the doodles, you set up the templates, and then you also facilitate and you troubleshoot. And I just think that it really can't be understated how important the coordinator role is if you're thinking about doing self-organizing, which I know you guys are. And so if you have a really great coordinator, things can be so much easier. I had a project recently, I brought someone on and things just moved so much faster. So I'll just keep it at that, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to pull in more people later, but yeah.
Yeah, and feel free to add more things to the list if you have some. Next slide. Okay, so just to give you the sense that, you might have to, the projects might need a lot of support by an actual person from your council initially, but then you try to do coaching, and then eventually you want somebody who can work independently. And some groups get a whole set of people who tend to coordinate whatever project is needed. And that's and they don't really need much support at all. So it's a matter of front loading some investment into coaching and supporting people, helping them learn like templates and things like that. But after a while, enough people in the network will know, what it means to coordinate a project, and will be able to fill that role. And it frees you up tremendously to do other things. And I think of those of you that are paid, or lots of you part-time coordinators of local councils, just imagine if you, could have a set of people doing work that you didn't really have to check in with, just enough to know what was going on and report back to the council. Next. So what does it mean to coach? Well, it really doesn't mean that much. It just means, and you don't even have to have any special skills except really be a good listener. And so check in before meeting to help develop the agenda, think over the meeting purpose, just helping them, think through stuff. And then after the meeting, helping them, especially if any challenges came up. And, they just need somebody to talk with and to listen to them think through. And you usually only have to do a couple of these in person, meaning either, on Zoom or phone or in actually face-to-face. Do it a couple of times before they get the knack and they can do this on their own. Next slide.
So,
okay, Yasmin, go for it.
So what if people aren't connected to the internet? This is a question that's been posed to us, and I think it's a really important one. A lot of times, for many of us, I'll say that for myself as someone who lives in New York, we're so used to everyone in our circles having access to fast internet, that not really being an issue. But for a lot of communities that you guys may be working with or hoping to pull in, some people are unconnected. And so how do you pull in those community members into your councils, and how can you make sure that they are not marginalized because of their lack of access? So how do you find folks? You can do a survey. You can get volunteers in this unconnected communities and have them do surveys. You can figure out, where do folks meet in person? I actually think that this is a really great, these things I'm talking about are really great ways to also find people who are diverse in terms of, some of your councils, you may be wanting to be more diverse racially, ethnically, income level, age, education, and also occupation. And so really, where are people meeting? And so it could be in people's homes, houses of worship, community centers. A lot of like immigrant communities really have even events and things like that you can go to, Independent Day events or food markets, things like that. And you can really find folks there to be able to pull folks in. You can get phone numbers, and I don't know if you guys know about phone trees, but it's like when you call someone and they call someone and they call someone. My mom actually is part of the Somali community that my family is part of, has enormous phone conferences, hundreds of people. And these are people that they may have never met in person, but they have real relationships with. And they're able to, if anything happens, immediately go into action because they are, they've built this networks. So you do these phone conferences. You could try text groups. So if people don't have smartphones, you can still connect with them and contact them through these text groups. And then, if you're thinking about, if they don't have the access of internet access in their home, you can also figure out where in your community can provide that for free for folks. And, public libraries are such a great resource for all of us. And then also universities, actually, a lot of them are open. Community colleges are open to the public. You don't have to be a student. So these can be places where you can get the librarian to set up a computer or get meeting rooms. A lot of them have high-tech things and even offer you iPads and things like that. So people can actually meet there and do the Zoom sessions there. And then find a champion and have them teach their peers. So it's kind of like the coaching we were talking about, that June was talking about. Really have someone who's really, be any age, but who wants to teach other folks how to use Zoom or the internet in general, or can offer some kind of resources. And that also is a great way for people to build relationships with each other. And then always get phone numbers and emails at meetings, and get them to kind of build on their natural groups. And so that they are really passionate about what they want to do. And then they're able to, even despite not being as connected, really coach and support each other.
And if you have any thoughts about that, or questions about, or things that you've done with less connected communities, it'd be really great to hear about. But as certainly you can still go ahead with self-organizing. It doesn't, we're Zoom fanatics. Yasmin and I, we use it all the time. And even if you're in a community like I am, that's rural, where people have to travel an hour sometimes to come to a central place for a meeting, using Zoom is certainly a wonderful way to save a lot of time, and you can actually meet more. And projects really benefit if you can help them learn how easy Zoom is. And it's, and it's free for 40 minutes and only costs $150 a year for as many calls as you want to make. So, we're still loving Zoom and being able to connect through Google Docs and such. But realizing that doesn't work for some communities, and you can still go ahead with these kinds of projects, even if you don't have the internet. So next slide. Okay, so let's just review what we've talked about. Like you can share the toolkit and slides with the council, start getting them comfortable with the idea, talking about how they could experiment with it. And you can either decide to shift a current community or find some new projects, work on finding some funding for projects. At least the main thing projects spend money on is coordination and a grant writer. Like the idea you have a 6-month project, and it's not really to get something done always. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just to get, you're thinking clear enough so you can write a proposal to get some more resources. And the groups that we've known, especially when funded by those innovation funds, some of them have been able to get hundreds of thousands of dollars from having that small project that brings some new people together, and they write a really interesting proposal for some food access kind of project. So then, finding a coordinator, which might be one of the folks on council or staff, and make sure they're up to speed on how to do this, and make sure there's somebody to coach. Even if you're a staff person, you need somebody else coaching you and listening to you and supporting you through that first 1 or 2 projects that you do. So next slide. Okay, so we're going to do the breakout rooms again, and we've got a slightly different set of questions here. I'm going to put that, or Yasmin, are you already on top of getting that?
Yeah.
Okay. What a team. Okay, so we're going to, again, we're going to put a link in here, and we're going to probably, we might, yeah, I think we're still going to do 3 groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to do that, or is?
I will do that. I can.
Okay. Okay, and I think that we'll figure out. We'll tell you the time again, but it'll be, around maybe a little less than 15 minutes, but it'll be around that. And you won't have to do introductions. So we really hope that you get somebody to write in the notes, and make sure you're really thinking about challenges. Really encourage you to think about challenges. What's going to keep you from, what might keep you from trying this out? Is it trying to convince your council or what? So get a list of, have somebody, get a person. How about this time we'll try, get a person in your group who's going to ask the 1 or 2 questions, or 3 or 4 or 5, whatever you have when you're done. Okay?
Equity, and what does that really say if you're expecting people to do work for you, but you're not able or willing to hire them to do the work. Also concerns about liability and conflicts of interest in terms of who's selected to get a stipend, and those types of issues. And I think we could have probably gone on a bit longer about just that stipend issue.
Yeah, so we've got more work to do. Yes, there certainly are issues, and hopefully I'm going to be writing some different groups, feelings about that. So if you're willing to put any of those issues in the chat, that'd be really great, because those are real issues. And, but I think a lot can be overcome by your design process and the way it's sort of framed. One group, for example, is having a facilitation pool, and they are raising money separately for them. And actually, any project can pull down a facilitator for that, and they're trained people, and they are doing extra work above and beyond what other people are doing. So that's just one way. But I agree with all those issues, and you're trying to get a really peer-based group, and so there's certainly conflicts and tensions there. Anybody else? Oh, come on! I see smiling faces. Who's going to report from the other 2 groups?
Don't be shy. Just take yourself off mute or in the chat.
So I'll go.
Thank you, Brenda.
For sure. So something we discussed is sort of like following through. I think that these are a lot of the same ideas that we've been thinking about, but making like an action plan to get it started and really digesting how this is a new mindset, and putting in infrastructure to help support a lot of this movement. So I like the idea of paid coordinators. I think like that's something that, you know, will definitely get the ball rolling on a lot of these projects. So we were talking about some of the ideas we've had and some of the successes, but also like thinking moving forward, you know, how do we make sure that it gets done?
Yeah. Well, oh, I'd love to hear about all your experiments. So, you know, we'll hope that you can stay in touch and continue sharing. Yasmin, do you want to share the screen again, and we can just wrap up? We've got just a couple minutes here left.
Yeah.
So, you know, just I think partly. Go ahead, Yasmin. I think you're going to do it.
Yeah. So let's just talk about next steps. Please share what steps you're going to take in the next few weeks to explore this idea more, share about it, or start on a project approach. It doesn't have to be big. We actually suggest thinking small, starting small, more tangible, and it's less overwhelming. It's something you can, you know, come back to the next session having done. So if you want to share in the chat, just quickly, what are you going to do? You know, are you going to think about facilitators or coordinators, or what projects, funders, donors? Just what are you taking from the session, and are you going to share? How are you going to share it back?
This is great. So please do share. Like, even if you're just going to read the, you know, get the Self-Organizing Toolkit and look at it, that's still a step in the right direction. Oh, great. Oh, yes, I do hope you share. So one other thing is, I really encourage you to, and maybe Yasmin, you could put some of these in the chat, but we have a Network Weaver newsletter every 2 weeks. It's got a free resource in it every week and a couple blog posts. You can share those, you know, send them on to the rest of your council and network. We also have a network weaving Facebook group, and it's great. If you have a question like this thing about stipends, there's almost 2,000 people on it, and if they haven't experienced it, I don't know who has, because you can say, hey, what have you done about stipends for project coordinators? And I think Rachel has also said that if you come up with, like tonight, you wake up in the middle of the night, I have this burning question, you can just email it to Rachel. She's going to compile them and we'll answer them for you. So just for you to know that. Okay, we're out of time just about. The next call is going to be state council. So if you're a state council, make sure you register for it. But the last thing is, if we can go to that last slide, and I'm going to put this link in here, is that we have just a little survey that if you would take the minutes to fill out, that just give us some feedback on here and talk about other topics you might be interested in. So just if you could all click on that and just take that, we'll say goodbye and thank you for showing up. We really enjoyed this. I don't know if you want to say Center for Livable Futures. You want to say anything here?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
No, I love that. Yeah.
June, again, can you just say how to save the chat?
Oh, okay. So down in the right-hand corner, so it says more. You just click on Save Chat. But we will be sending this, the recording, link to the recording, and it will be in 3 pieces. And I hope it gets on, Rachel, on your cloud. Since we had another person being host. So let us know if there's any problem. We'll be sending you all of that information, links to the first 2 sessions, all the slides. Oh, and don't forget to go to www.networkweaver.com, and there's a tab that says resources. There are like 24 free network resources on there. Everything from there's a network toolkit, self-organizing toolkit, network weaver checklist, all free for you to use and to share as much as you want. It's all Creative Commons. If you want to change it and you want the original, just email me and you can take it and make it, change the questions or whatever. So we'd really love for you. Oops, and I spelled Network Weaver wrong. So you'll have to correct
The link
that.
is there with a newsletter. You can find
Well,
it.
yeah, if you go to the one with the newsletter, it'll take you to the site. Great talking, and all the best to all of you. We really hope that you can at least try some of this out, because what we've seen is that when people do the self-organizing network stuff, and especially when you want to do policy, and we want you to do, there needs to be tons of food policy created and implemented. And so you're going to need the self-organizing network to get enough creativity and enough people involved. So we'll be looking forward to hearing from you and all your success stories and challenges. And thanks for showing up here today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, June and Yasmin.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.